ever done something nice for someone and thought, okay, I am crushing this whole good person thing? I was there, feeling pretty great about dropping some extra change in a donation jar.
Yeah.
But diving into these sources on tzedakah, turns out it's a whole different ballgame in Jewish tradition.
It really is. And it's easy for any of us to, I think, to think of charity as optional, like a nice thing to do when you can.
Yeah.
But in Jewish thought, tzedakah is presented as a moral obligation, something you're supposed to do.
Okay, so not just a suggestion box then.
Right.
What's the thinking there?
So the Torah, which is like the bedrock of Jewish law, right,
Yeah.
lays out this idea that everyone deserves a chance to thrive. Tzedakah is about actively creating a just world, not just waiting for it to happen.
So how does that actually play out? Like, how do you go from an idea to actually making a difference?
Okay, so imagine a seesaw.
Okay.
On one side, you've got all the resources in the world,
Sure.
and on the other, people's needs. Tzedakah is like constantly adjusting that seesaw, making sure everyone has what they need to live with dignity.
Right, so you're not just throwing money at a problem, you're trying to create balance.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting with the idea that tzedakah can actually save you from death.
Whoa.
Not in some vague karmic way,
You're right.
but literally. And to understand that, we need to look at the story of Binyamin Hatzadik, a man known for his righteousness.
This story blew my mind. It's like a masterclass in ethical dilemmas packed into a few paragraphs.
It really is. So Binyamin Hatzadik is in charge of distributing charity. A famine hits, and a woman comes to him desperate, begging for help.
And he's like the community safety net, right? Everyone's counting on him to, like, make sure people don't starve.
Exactly. But here's the catch. He tells her the funds are all used up.
Oh man, talk about pressure. She must have been devastated.
She was. She pleads with him, saying, "If you don't help, my 7 sons and I will starve."
Oh, wow.
Imagine being in Binyamin's shoes. What do you do?
Right, he's got this impossible choice: break the rules he's bound by, or potentially let 8 people die.
And he chooses to help.
Wow.
He uses his own money to save the woman and her family.
Wow, that's serious dedication. But it doesn't end there, does it?
No. As a result of this incredible act of generosity, he becomes gravely ill. But just as he's nearing death, the heavens intervene. Angels plead with God to spare Binyamin, pointing out that he saved 8 lives with his selflessness.
And God's like, you've got a point.
Right. And Binyamin is granted an extra 22 years of life. But here's the detail that always gets me. The woman didn't initially mention her children. Why wait until the last minute to reveal the full extent of her need?
That's a good point. I wonder if it was shame, you know?
Yeah.
Like maybe asking for help for herself felt more acceptable than admitting her whole family was struggling. We see that even today, right?
Absolutely. And her hesitation reveals something crucial about the nature of true giving. One of your sources, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, known as the Rambam, was a hugely influential Jewish philosopher. He argued that the highest form of tzedakah isn't just giving handouts. It's about empowering someone to become self-sufficient.
So it's not just about giving someone a fish. It's about teaching them to fish. Give a person a fish and you feed them for a day. Teach a person to fish and you feed them for a lifetime.
That's the idea. The Rambam believed that when you give someone the tools to support themselves, you're not just meeting an immediate need,
Right.
but helping them reach their full potential.
Yeah.
It's about fostering dignity and independence.
You know, that reminds me of this time I had a friend who was going through a rough patch. Long story short, he ended up losing his apartment.
Oh.
He was sleeping on couches, too proud to ask for help.
Yeah.
And I knew he was a talented artist, but was having trouble marketing his work. So I connected him with a friend who owns a gallery. And guess what? He ended up landing an exhibition and getting back on his feet.
That's a perfect example of what the Rambam was talking about.
It's amazing how a little leg up can make such a difference.
Yeah.
But I imagine there are situations where direct assistance is really the most compassionate response. Not everyone is in a position to become fully self-sufficient, right?
You're absolutely right. Sometimes meeting a person's immediate needs is the most important thing. But even then, we can look for ways to approach giving with dignity and respect. It's all about that balance.
Okay, so we've got this practical side of tzedakah, the idea of creating a more just world. But then there's this idea that it can actually save you from death. And for that, we need to talk about Rabbi Akiva's daughter.
Right.
Now, this story takes us into some mystical territory.
It certainly does.
Okay, so imagine this. It's her wedding day, but there's this ominous prophecy hanging over her. She's she's not supposed to live through the night.
Right.
Talk about bad timing.
It's a classic example of how Jewish tradition views prophecy not as a predetermined fate, but as a warning, a potential outcome that can be altered through our choices.
Okay, so there's still hope. So what happens next?
Well, in the midst of all the wedding preparations, a beggar comes to the door, desperate for food.
And everyone's caught up in the celebration, too busy to notice him.
Right. Exactly. Everyone except for the bride. She sees the beggar, and despite knowing the prophecy, she offers him a plate of food that was meant for her.
Wow, that's a serious act of generosity, especially with everything else going on.
It is. And that act of kindness ends up being her saving grace. Later that night, it's discovered that a venomous snake had slithered into her room and gotten stuck in her hair comb.
Had she not given her food away, she would have reached for the comb herself.
And met a tragic end.
Chills. So, is this story saying her Tzedakah literally saved her life? Or is there, like, a deeper meaning here?
It's open to interpretation, but I think the story highlights the powerful connection between generosity and protection.
Okay.
It's as if by extending kindness to another, she shifted something in the universe, creating a ripple effect that ultimately protected her.
That's a pretty powerful message.
Yeah.
It's like that idea that what you put out into the world comes back to you.
Exactly. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of tzedakah, the idea that it doesn't just benefit the recipient, it transforms the giver as well.
Oh, now this is interesting. Tell me more.
Have you ever heard the story about the wealthy man who stopped giving to his rabbi?
Okay, stop giving to his rabbi. That doesn't sound good. Spill the tea.
So there was this wealthy man, a devoted follower of Rabbi Zusha of Hennepal, a renowned Hasidic master. Now, this man truly believed that his financial success was a direct result of Rabbi Zusha's blessings.
Okay, so he's a believer.
Oh yeah.
What changed?
Well, one day he learned that Rabbi Zusha himself had a rebbe, a spiritual mentor he looked up to. And being a bit of a businessman, this guy thought, wait a minute, if Rabbi Zusha is that connected, imagine the blessings I could get by going straight to the source.
He cut out the middleman. I can't believe he'd risk it.
Right, but he did. He stopped supporting Rabbi Zusha and started sending his donations directly to the rebbe. And you can guess what happened next. His luck ran out.
Karma, maybe?
Well, the man went back to Rabbi Zusha, totally distraught, asking why his plan had backfired. And Rabbi Zusha, being the wise soul he was, smiled and said, "Your calculations make sense, but you're approaching this from the wrong angle."
Okay, I'm hooked. What was the wrong angle?
Rabbi Zusha explained that before, the man had given from a pure place, without expecting anything in return, and the universe had responded in kind. But when he started treating tzedakah like some kind of spiritual investment strategy, trying to maximize his returns, well, the flow of abundance dried up.
So it's like the saying goes, the love of money is the root of all evil, even in a spiritual context.
Exactly. The lesson here isn't to discourage strategic giving, but to remind us that true generosity comes from the heart. It's about connecting with something larger than ourselves, not trying to game the system.
That really resonates with something else I read about tzedakah. The word itself, it doesn't literally translate to charity, does it? It's more about like righteousness or justice.
You're exactly right. Tzedakah isn't some optional act of kindness. It's about actively participating in creating a fairer, more just world.
So it's not just about being nice. It's about recognizing that we're all connected and our actions have a ripple effect on everyone around us.
Beautifully put. And maybe that's the key to understanding how giving can save your life. It's not about some magical formula, but about aligning yourself with a deeper truth. When we choose generosity and compassion, we tap into a powerful force.
So instead of asking, like, what's in it for me, we should be asking, how can I contribute? How can I make a difference?
Exactly. And as we've seen from these stories, even the smallest act of kindness can have a profound impact.
It's like that butterfly effect, right?
Yeah.
You never know the full extent of the good you might unleash with a single act of tzedakah.
Absolutely.
Well, that was an incredible deep dive. What's like the one thing you hope our listener takes away from all of this?
If there's one thing to remember, it's this. Tzedakah is a way of life, a commitment to justice, and a recognition of our shared humanity.
It's about looking around and asking, how can I help tip the scales towards a better world? And you know what? It doesn't require like grand gestures. Maybe it's donating to a food bank or volunteering your time. Maybe it's simply offering a helping hand to a neighbor in need.
Every little bit counts.
So to our listener out there, we challenge you. Find one small opportunity to practice tzedakah this week. You might be surprised by the impact it has, not just on the world around you, but on your own life as well.
It's a journey worth taking.
Couldn't agree more.